first ever Top 10 Tech Trends Wrap-Up program. And we're here to take a closer look at some of the trends that were discussed in last Wednesday's 11th annual Top 10 Tech Trends debate. With us we have Rob Coneybeer, Managing Director of Shasta Ventures, Brian Cooley, Editor-at-Large of CNET Networks, Tim Jellison, Executive Partner of Accenture, and Noel Lee, Founder and CEO of Monster Cable Products. And of course our moderator, Shawn Dubravac, Economist at the Consumer Electronics Association. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for being here. This program is generously sponsored by Fenwick & West. I feel like I'm in an odd position here. I just didn't want to stand behind the fortress. And we certainly do appreciate Fenwick's support. Thank you very much, Fenwick & West. Let's give them a round of applause. I want to quickly run through the next set of programs for you. On June 3rd, a breakfast called Stimulating the Energy Industry about, you guessed it, the stimulus package and how it will impact the energy industry. The evening of June 4, Microsoft's chief software architect, Ray Ozzie, is coming, so here's your chance, a rather rare chance to hear Ray Ozzie. And then on June 18, it's our annual Good Wine and Good Company program, and yes, there will be some wineries on hand and pouring. Is there anybody in the room who is not familiar with the Top 10 Tech Trends program? Is there anybody who not familiar? Okay. Is there anybody who actually attended last week's program? Okay, wonderful. Well, let me give you just a little bit of background. For the past 11 years, the Churchill Club each year has assembled a panel of luminaries, venture capitalists in this case. For the first several years, the 10 trends came from the Red Herring magazine. And when the Red Herring went away, then the onus fell to the VCs to come up with the trends. And this last year, we mixed it up a little bit. Tony Perkins and Jason Ponton, the co-moderators, decided to come up with 5, and they're, in fact, journalists, came up with 5 trends. The venture capitalists came up with 5, and then there were 2 bonus trends. And so these are the trends that we'll be looking at today, not necessarily all of them, but our panel here today has chosen some of them, and if you are disappointed that they perhaps didn't bring up some of the trends, they're all listed, by the way, in your program, then you'll have an opportunity during Q&A to bring the trends up and ask the panelists to comment. So with that, I would like to introduce our moderator, Shawn Dubravac. Shawn is the Economist and Director of Research for the Consumer Electronics Association, or CEA, where he directs CEA's economic analysis, consumer research, and helps oversee the day-to-day operations of CEA's many research initiatives. He is a past speaker here at the club, and we're thrilled to have him back with us again. So let's welcome Shawn Dubravac.
Thanks very much, Karen, and thanks everybody for joining us here. I am certainly an unabashed fan of Churchill Club. I think they do a fabulous job of bringing great programming together. This particular event, as Karen mentioned, came out of a conversation Karen and I had nearly a year ago following the Tech Trends event. And one of the things I saw going to the event last year was that these luminaries come up with great big macro trends, but they never really address the micro foundations of those macro trends. They never dove into what it meant for our businesses today, what we could do to actually to take advantage of the opportunity. So the hope of today's event is that the panel creates a rich, robust conversation around what we can do today to do that. So with that, I thought we'd dive into the very first trend, which was the millennials. Joe, at the event last week, talked about the current graduating class, those born in 1988 for the most part, can't remember a time where they weren't online. This is the first graduating class where they were online their entire lives. We talked about how the median age of the world's population is 26 to 27, and made the argument that this is somehow a very unique cohort unlike any we've seen in the past. Steve argued that every new generation is always driving change, and so that this millennials is no different than any kind of young, new early adopter. So I think that, the question for us is this group any different? Are the millennials any different than any other cohort between the ages of 18 and say 29?
Well, I think it is important to note that they do have this break from traditional media in their history. I don't know if I can pinpoint all the ways it's going to affect them and their appetites in black and white, but to not have any reference to anything that wasn't interactive, social, connected, real-time. Look at all those attributes that they've grown up with, and they've never thought about things that are published once a day. That doesn't make any sense to them. They've never thought so much about information primarily flowing down from the sources down to us. So that whole idea of this inverted funnel where information comes from doesn't really work for them. They think about everything being shared, collaborative, and recommended. It's a completely different game, at least for media companies, from certainly where we come from. Even though the CNET's an interactive media company, we're 15, 16 years into this. We're old new media. So even we are watching a big change in our audience from the people who were early on big interactive media consumers when we got started. Now we have a whole different audience to deal with that makes our original audience look like they're chipping away at stone tablets. So there is your interactive audience, and then there's this group, which is a different interactive audience, and they're just submerged in it. It changes all the rules.
Yeah, Shawn, and I think Ann made a good point that it's the natural way in which this generation really interacts with technology. That's the key point. And the impact then that they can have on their parents and influencing the parents' ways of interacting. We're seeing this in our workforce. Accenture has about 180,000 people worldwide. 40% of our workforce is Gen Y or younger. So you can imagine, with that kind of population, big implications on how we think about policies, practices. Everything has to be very personal and not just a policy from top down, for example. But I think that's also sort of the way this generation thinks about interacting with technology. It's got to mean something. The connectivity is always on. There's always something moving.
Well, they only read the HR notes if it's tweeted to them?
Well, they actually may not do that. And the reason for that is everybody likes to talk about the kids and think they can predict what the kids are going to do. But the reality is Twitter users tend to be older users. If you look at teenagers and you look demographically at what's going on, what people are calling the millennials are not adopting Twitter at the same rate that older people, as in people that are 25, 30 and older, are actually using Twitter. So it's not clear that that's actually going to be the case. Clearly Twitter is a phenomenon. I think in this room, myself included, use it on a pretty regular basis. But I think that there are a few things that if you dig beneath the surface on the millennials, there are some things that I think an older generation thinks is going to be a big deal, and, oh, those dumb kids don't know what they're doing. But the younger generation is going to look at technology in a very different way. So an example of that is thinking about privacy, for example. I would imagine most of the people in this room think, oh, I've got this great advice for kids. Be careful what you put on the web. Now, if you're growing up as a kid in a world where everything goes up on the web and nothing's private, start to think about what does that really mean? It means that privacy might not be as important as we like to think it is. And the way in which you interact with other people, today we may be looking at it the same way that Victorian England had kind of these notions of propriety. We may look at it in a very different way. I would imagine most of the people in this room probably have things that they did or fun they had in the past that they might not want to share with the world. Imagine a world where actually that's shared on a very regular basis, and I'm sure everybody in this room has had this experience of pictures that they had in college or maybe in high school showing up on Facebook because of these things called scanners and finding out about it through a news feed where they're actually tagged and they go in and untag themselves. But privacy may not matter as much as we think, and I think in a lot of ways you follow what the kids do, you watch what they do, it may not matter as much as we like to think.
It's a horrifying vision, isn't it?
Well, it may or may not be so horrifying. But again, remember the kids, the new generations coming along are always maligned and say it's horrifying. They're using the phone. It's horrifying. They're spending all this time on TV. It's horrifying. They're doing these things. And at least as kind of consumer investors, instead of judging, we like to step back and just take a look at what are people actually doing as opposed to what we think they're going to do.
Well, it's kind of scary to think that this generation is going to be mass consuming, and the adults The adults, when they grow into adults, will be part of the consumers that we have to market to. And I think, like, we have to adjust, and older companies like us who've been around didn't quite understand what was happening, and to market something is completely different than what it was in the past. And to think that these folks are going to be the mass consumers of the future, that's a pretty scary thought of how to work with that. But I think if we understand it, it also makes it easier for us to market products.
I think people are always scared of the next generation.
Yes.
Well, I think it's also interesting that the sort of second-order effects are starting to kick in with social media now, too. We just did a look between 2008 and 2009, just completed a study, and actually baby boomers now are taking up a lot of new content at a rate 20 times faster than Gen Y. So you could argue that's just sort of a small number to big number effect. But what we're starting to see is that influence on the older folks by the younger. And actually, when it comes to blogs, social media, podcasts, listening to iPod, actually it's the baby boomers now that are taking it up at a much faster rate. It's an interesting effect.
And so how do we, on a daily basis, how do we merchandise things? Noel, maybe you can add some expertise here. How do we merchandise to this group? Is it any...
Well, if you look at traditional, it's through retail and stores and brick and mortar. But, we train a lot of salespeople at Monster. We touch all those young people who are doing the selling. And those are the folks who are online. Okay, so whatever you teach them through traditional retail, they're all part of, the millennials because they're 22, 27-year-old kids doing the retail. But how to productize that and how to merchandise to it is, I think we're all trying to discover that. And how to sell to them effectively, I think we're all trying to discover that magic formula.
Well, I think one thing I would say is because of this, it's harder to trick consumers than it used to be in the past. And I think the millennials really pick up on that. And that means that you really have to focus on this thing called product. Actually have a great product. Have a product that people care about, they're passionate about. Whether it's the things that Apple creates that people have an emotional connection to and enjoy, it just works. You open up the box, you know what to do, you know how it works. You don't have to open the instruction manual. It's all those pieces. It's not about having lots of features. It's about having a great customer and consumer experience. So there's a phrase that I think is overused in Silicon Valley, and that's viral marketing. And I think what really matters, and this is what we believe as a firm really matters, is word of mouth. It's where people have a great experience and they want to bring their friends, they want to refer it to other people. So if you think about that principle ahead of the techniques, think about what you really want to do is have an experience that other people want to bring into it. That's where social media networks really take off, is think about when you got the high five invitation, okay? You knew you might have been tricked, or you might get an email from somebody else a few minutes later that said, oh, I didn't mean to send that out to you, versus other social network invitations you might have gotten, or when people told you about, hey, you need to try out Mint, or you need to try out these things. So I think that actually, as these media come along, the things that tend to do really well and go through the blogosphere and get tweeted about and recommended, they actually are genuinely good products that people want to use and they want their friends to use as well.
And one thing that we notice is it's a peakier world in terms of the products that succeed and that don't. I would say in the earlier days when CNET was starting up and we were doing technology product reviews, primarily computers in those days, it was a more level, kind of a softer bell curve of the products that were strong. There was a little wider spread and a fairly good number of winners or successful products in a given category. It's just gotten pointier and pointier as you go because of what Rob's talking about. There is a strong recommendation ethic out there. And if you don't hear about it from an influential friend, you probably don't accept the product, almost regardless of what the review says. Of course, there are people that are going to be outliers who are particularly focused on really learning the product themselves and saying, no, that's a good product, and I don't really care if I'm in the spike or not. But a lot of people are very much focused on what's hot. And the hot got real narrow in the last few years because of the amount of social discussion and recommendation of tech products, not to mention everything else that people talk about online. And so we've noticed a real narrowing and a peaking of the hot products and the traffic that goes to them.
At the same time, though, that you have that narrowing and peaking, do you find you also have a broadening of the base of discrete inputs that have to be taken into account from individuals as they're starting to socialize and share their thoughts? And how do you, I think one of the challenges is how do you make use of that broad now discrete, unstructured sort of information to really inform products and to market in a compelling way?
Well, what's hot? What you're saying is what's hot is only hot for a short period of time.
For many things, yeah. And once you cool off real fast. That's also part of this peakiness. So if you look at the bell curve as a timeline, if you want to look at it that way, you go up and you may go down real fast as well. There are a lot of exceptions. Apple is the most obvious one. They can't seem to.
But even the iPod is peaked in a lot of ways, or plateaued at least.
Because Apple peaked it with the iPhone.
Right.
They peaked themselves.
So the message is make money while you can.
Yeah, and make it quickly and get in there hard. And but again, there are exceptions. And the question is it a SKU level peak that we're looking at? Is it a family of products under a certain brand that we're looking at, or is it a category of products, multiple brands? Like right now, netbooks are red hot. But I know the industry that makes them, the same people that make them, almost all of them make notebooks. And a lot of them are going to be at least going towards smartphones. The question is, how do you keep that narrow enough so that you keep the consumer focused on it being a discrete product versus if the netbook gets to get bigger and faster and has a bigger screen and more processor and a little more expensive, isn't it now just a notebook? So that's a very narrow distinction that they have to keep going. Otherwise, they fall off their peak because the category becomes indistinguishable. So I guess there are several peaks here. Peaks of time that you have in market, peaks of whether you're one of the few hot products or not, and a peak of whether your category is discernible or if it's moved along and dissolved into something else.
Yeah, and I think this builds largely upon some of the other trends that were talked about at the event. One of the bonus trends was the fact that the traditional editor, traditional publisher is still here to stay. There's still value for the traditional reporter. But does that change given where the millennials stand? And I think one of the other trends that was hit upon was the idea of distributed web, and it was noted that social networking has now surpassed email use, which is a phenomenal trend. We've found from our own research that about a quarter of those on social networking are talking about products. They'll mention a product that they've tried or a service that they've tried, but 60% of those that read about a product or service on a social network then go get more information. So I think that builds exactly on what Rob's saying. It's about a quarter of people are talking about things, but most of the people reading those posts then are actually moving to action. They're getting more information. They're going out and either buying the product, learning more, and really driving business.
Well, it's interesting because people like to say, are social networks superficial? But the reality is the products that spread through like wildfire through them tend to be very genuine products. They actually, that's part of what leads to the peakiness that you're talking about, where you have increasing share for the ones that do well.
Yeah, the winners win really hard and the losers lose harder, I would say, to overgeneralize a little bit. It's a real have and have not market compared to what it was because, let's face it, if you hear about something from someone, you have great faith in it versus whether you did your own analysis of it. For most consumers, they're not confident of their technology acumen in most cases. That's why they use social media and editorial media so much. But as soon as they find that a few people like them are going with something, or how many ratings does it have on Amazon, or how many people gave it a thumbs up, even if there's a good number of thumbs down, it's like, okay, this is like 60, 70% of people say it's pretty good.
So just back to the point you were bringing up about reporters, whether traditional media matters anymore. I think that the way in which people become recognized as leaders in an area, that will actually change. So you look at Arrington, that everybody, I think in the industry, I'm sure yourself accepted, but a lot of people like to talk about off the record. It's really remarkable what he's built with TechCrunch and kind of the paths that he's going down. So to me, it's fascinating because I'm not trained as a journalist. I came out here 13 years ago into the industry and have gotten to know a lot of people in your industry and have kind of followed how they've thought about the rise of blogs and Twitter and each of these things as they've come along. And it's been interesting. There have been some people that have really adjusted to kind of the rapid-fire writing, and then there's other people that have said, I just want to get out, collect as much information from as many sources, and then have kind of a really well-formed point of view. And I think going forward, there's going to be room for both.
Yes.
But I do think that increasingly it's going to be about personal brands than being about, is it the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the San Francisco Chronicle, or, I mean, those things are falling away, and I think there will be a few major brands that people getting affiliated with will actually help their personal brands, but then those brands will spin out the way that you see Walt Mossberg and others really building followings around the people themselves and what they can do, and people are willing to wait and hear from those people. But I think it is going to increasingly become a star-based industry, and what that distribution mechanism is, it kind of doesn't matter as much as there's a complete disintermediation between the journalist, okay, the people that can build the great stories, either build them rapidly, rapid fire, Arrington style, or can do it in a considered way that people are willing to wait for.
And so much of what is in the blogosphere, with a few exceptions of people that do a lot of original work, but so much of what powers the blogosphere is relatively traditional, established media getting things going and doing a lot of the hard work, creating stories that have some meat you can pick apart and comment on. We grappled with this over the last few years at CNET because we weren't doing any blogs. The blogs got out there. We had to launch our own blog environment, and that's largely what powers us now. But we also had a certain calmness about it because we realized that so much of the traffic out there in the blogosphere that we needed to capture and get into was talking about us. So they were carrying us out there for us, obviously not the way we wanted it to be. We want to make sure that we're the original property as well. But they carry you out there if you're traditional media. So while they are also, the blogosphere is helping to antiquate traditional media, it's also helping keep it alive because so much of the meaty stuff is still coming out of the real newsrooms. And we talk about this all the time at CNET. It's like, wait a minute, if the papers went away, the dire prediction in Time at the top of the year that 12 papers or whatever will die this year, 12 big ones, 2 of which I guess are already there. Where does news come from? Where does it start? I mean, TV and radio stations don't have newsrooms that are worth a damn. They're not doing any real news. A lot of the internet properties out there are very narrow and spiky and don't connect the dots. Even the biggest and most successful, the tech blogs, are tech blogs. You do have bigger operations that are online. Huffington Post is one of the more established and richer. But, where are the big, comprehensive worldview newsrooms if the newspapers cut that back because they become these very small, scrawny operations? It's a little frightening.
Well, do we see less credible things on the blogosphere because anybody can be a reporter, anybody can be a journalist, anybody can put an opinion out there, and I'm feeling there's a lot of information out there is not vetted through, and there's no control over what gets said on the blogosphere.
Yeah, but nobody follows those blogs either. They're way down in page rank. Mm-hmm. Nobody cares. I mean, it's no different in practice than somebody sitting up a printing press and handing out papers on a corner. You could always do that. You had freedom of speech before. Nobody pays attention to it. They don't move up the relevance algorithms because people don't care. People don't believe it.
Yeah, there are some times where there's a little bit of a leveling effect with the web because everyone can look pretty much equally good. If you hand out a broadsheet on the corner, I know that's not the New York Times. I can tell by the production and by the physical, tangible of your item, as well as by the writing quality, which is always level. I mean, everyone has to write good stuff, whatever media they are. But, everyone can look pretty good online. The cost of entry is very low to getting the same look and feel as a high-end publication. That's the only area that does kind of, I think, sometimes fool some people. Again, the numbers never work out.
Even Matt Marshall with VentureBeat has built a brand that when you type in venturebeat.com, for those of you that navigate directly, you're probably going to think about that a little differently than you think about something that you haven't seen before.
Yes.
And again, its behavior is changing, but in philosophy, it's not that much different than something you haven't seen. It's, have you built up a brand? Have you built up awareness? And there's been kind of a sea shift where I think we've gone through kind of a 3 or 4 year period where people are willing to try new brands. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of these
we're getting toward the end of that now.
The shopping mall has been built, right? And people have filled out all the different stores. And, the anchor tenants have changed. Maybe Sears has gone away and Macy's has come in. Maybe the Boston Globe has gone away, and the Wall Street Journal has kind of spread out to be 6 days a week as opposed to 5. Yeah. So, anyways, next trend, huh?
Yeah, I mean, okay. I think one of the key takeaways for me is that it seems like the market is doing a much better job at sorting this information and
funny how that works
and really driving the results.
That again.
And I think that hits upon another trend, which was the idea of unstructured data. and whether we see, so the idea is that, of course, not a new trend. We're seeing data proliferate the environment. Storage costs are going to zero, which means you can keep everything forever, even if you don't need it or never will use it. And so the idea is all of this unstructured data need to be indexed, or where are the opportunities there with the in the unstructured data? A lot of that unstructured data, and they didn't really hit upon this at the event, though, is video, which is difficult to structure. Mm-hmm. I think what are the opportunities there to really, part of it, I think we don't need all of this data structured. Some of it is still very difficult to structure in the form of video. So where are the real opportunities there?
So maybe coming at it a slightly different way is, instead of saying how do you go through and sort it, what might that enable together with other things that are happening? So one trend I was surprised wasn't talked about in this thing was the idea of location-based services. Okay, so by that it's kind of, if you're in a place and you have GPS and you know exactly where you are, what does that start to enable? And there's a concept that we've been thinking about a lot at Shasta around what we call place rank. So you talk about page rank in Google, but place rank is where you are. There's something that's very relevant to the location where you are. So you basically have universal connectivity where you are. You have these open platforms with mobile that are coming along, and then you have a very unique search key, and that's where you are. So you look at your lat long in this room, it's very different than the lat long that if you're out on the street. So what that means is what might be interesting to you at exactly this point in time, your geospatial coordinates, not just where you are, but time of day, it's actually an incredibly unique search key. And I don't think people have really realized this yet, and these platforms are coming along. So marry that with this huge sea of unstructured data that's out there on the web today, and it allows you to search through it in a very different way. So what that means, for example, is think about Yelp that has all this restaurant and recommendation information. And then you also have City Search that has similar information. And for the first time, those have open APIs that other people can start to plug into and pull that data out of. So I think the presentation layer that would meet a specific consumer need, which is maybe you come in here, you want to see some background on the speakers, et cetera, that has already been pulled together by the Churchill Club. You don't have to do anything unique. So if you're able to somehow curate, like Wikipedia or something else, information and pull it together into kind of a geo browser based on place rank, it's a very different way of thinking about the world and what you're doing. And those technologies are available. It can all be pulled together. And if you put that together with, there was this idea of digital goods on devices is the growth story of the coming decade. I actually think location-based advertising is going to become incredibly relevant because where you are, what you're doing, gives more behavioral information than actually people's personal statement of intent. So, I'd be interested in what these guys have to say about location-based information, but I think that's how you kind of filter through a lot of what you're talking about with Unstructured.
And Rob, would you include near-field communications in that as well? Technology to enable?
It might be. I mean, are you talking about the idea of just technologies to be able to talk to something that's close to you?
With your phone, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of enabling, but I just think knowing where something is very specifically, like that X, Y, maybe Z altitude, so you know that it's actually a law firm on the top floor and not something where you are. It's just enabling technology.
Absolute coordinates as well as relative placement.
Yeah.
Right. So real-time web is relevant when it's location-based.
It becomes even more important.
More so.
But it's a very different way of thinking about the world. It's a geo browser. It's the information that I want when I'm here as opposed to 20 feet that direction it's very different.
Yeah, time and place is a huge turbocharger on what we've used the web for so far.
Place rank. It's a search key that people have not really picked up on yet, but I think is incredibly relevant.
And that ties into an area that I would add to this, if I had been adding one point to this, would be the in-car connected experience is going to be huge in the next few years as we start to get connected GPS navigation, whether it's OEM in the dash or whether it's a portable you bring. And this is what you're talking about there. And yes, the web browser in the dash is coming. BMW's already got it out in Europe. They haven't quite brought it to the U.S. for a lot of reasons. Doing all of it. They better be. And that gets into technologies on how to make sure that you segregate who can access certain applications within the vehicle to obviously avoid massive driver distraction. But that's another issue entirely. But yeah, the in-car experience comes from this, and that's an enormously untapped audience. It's been pretty much in prison in the history of automotive, and this is a very automotive nation. Think of the market that automotive in-car is, that has kind of been in prison listening to the same sources for a very long time and having almost no interactivity of any kind unless they're doing this. What kind of car do you drive? I drive a 69 Ford XL convertible, so not a lot of tech in my car.
Okay. But if we know that, and we know where you are.
You know that you can't reach me in that car. Well, my phone will be on.
Well,
But if your phone is connected,
yeah.
we know who you are, what you're driving, where you are, then we know a great deal about what you might be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are not interested in these car dealers, but you might be interested in those dealers.
Yep.
No, you were going to add.
yeah, well, listen, we got to think about what a wonderful world we live in with all of this information out there. And thank God it's out there. We got to think of ways to productize it and get it to more people. So the fact that YouTube is available on just about any device you can pick up, and it's going to be resident in every TV that comes out that connects to the internet is phenomenal. You know, we can search those videos, sitting, watching TV. And making that information more available is a tremendous opportunity, both for the information gatherers, and being able to distribute that information. I think there's great opportunity out there for that.
And watch those videos while we're driving our car, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All those cable boxes
Yeah,
are not linking 12.
Tim.
So maybe turning to add an enterprise spin to this. I think Ann Winblad had a great phrase referring to unstructured data as the dark matter of the enterprise, which I'm not sure I fully understand what she means, but I think I like it. This is a huge challenge in the enterprise. I mean, data is, pardon the expression, a mess. Typically, customer data, vendor data, trading partner data, employee data to a lesser extent because it's more controllable. But there's a long ways to go to tackle this problem with business customers, and huge opportunity. The traditional relational bases obviously don't handle it. App servers, as Ann mentioned, it's just a totally different problem. Still huge opportunity. A lot of people going after the space, but governance and the ability to actually apply analytics. Governance is a huge issue. Who controls the data? Who can add, change, delete in an enterprise? Huge problem, basic problem, yet to be solved in any fundamental way before data quality really improves in the enterprise. A huge space.
In the enterprise, is there a lot of trying to manage these new highly democratized social media, the Twitter and Facebook information, and go as far back as I am? I mean, is that obviously there are rules about how that can be harvested, but let's face it, people are doing a lot of social interaction at their desk every day.
Yep.
Does that inform the enterprise at all? Leaving the various lines apart.
If you can turn it into a game, then you can harness it. Yeah. I mean, you think I'm kidding, but I mean, there are companies out there in, commercial here, like Lithium. And what they do is they create these online communities for big companies like Dell and HP and others. Mm-hmm. And what they found is that these communities where some users, some customers answer questions for other customers, they actually lead to higher customer satisfaction than if somebody from the company was trying to answer their question.
Yeah. Some of the advertisers on CNET have started doing that. They've had super users take over a portion of their support community, and they're incredibly successful at good answers and attracting people to even come to them for answers because they have a different tone of voice in the experience, whether it's text or live.
Crazy, isn't it?
And it just came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, I think Vinod had a good point around the notion of personal data assistance as well. So for the opportunity for data to find us versus us finding data, and particularly in the corporate world where, frankly, there's a long ways to go in tackling this problem. I just wonder if some game change like that is really the way to kind of leapfrog.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, you just hit on it. I mean, Ram mentioned that the big opportunity here is to come up with a great user experience. So it's trying to figure out how to deliver that rich user experience that is unmasked, that is
And authentic has to always be a keyword in there as well. That's one of the things that we see across all of this is authenticity is craved, and as much as you can, and like you say, Rob, the idea of let's get something to go viral is so contrived. and is so unattainable when you seek out to go viral. First dig 2 graves.
Well, let's fly to Pluto, right? Let's give tours to Pluto. Yeah, that
Right.
sounds like fun, but how do you do it?
Right.
Right.
It's like, okay, wait a minute. You've seen it. That doesn't mean you can get there. So that's an important factor. Is authenticity is what powers so much of this, and that's why I bring up the idea of this kind of scraggly ground level communication people are doing within the enterprise, off the radar. Is that a way to know your organization better, even though it may not even be about the enterprise? Yeah. Yeah, and you may not always want to see what you find out, but that's a different issue.
But the millennials will like it.
Right, because they're fine with not having any privacy. Yeah, good for them.
So what else was missed at the presentation last week? What were the big trends that were missed, or even some of the other micro underpinnings of the trends that were mentioned?
Well, one thing I'll throw out there, I guess it's going to sound really controversial to say this because it's like one of the hype stories of technology right now is I actually think the iPhone is underhyped. And I think open mobile platforms are far more fundamental than anybody realizes. Mm-hmm. And you look at the flubbed OV App Store launch with Nokia. I don't think Nokia really understands user experience. And I think they'll be back to selling rubber boots as their primary enterprise in another 10 years. And I think people are going to be kind of surprised in 5 years when Apple has double-digit handset share, not just smartphone share, but handset share. And, everybody talks about the Silicon Valley echo chamber and, oh, aren't we excited because it's this fun, great new open device. But, do a sanity check when you go and you visit your family in the, families in the flyover states, or you go to a wedding, or you go somewhere like that. And you find that people are talking about the devices. They want iPhones. They want iPod Touches. And when you put that together with what's going on in the developer ecosystem there's easily, and this is what we're seeing when we see the plans come through, there is 30 to 40 more, 30 to 40x more developer activity on the iPhone platform than any other platform. Now, just stop for a second. I mean, if you're an engineer and you think about 1 to 2 orders of magnitude, that's unbelievable. So what's happening is we're seeing plan after plan after plan come in where people talk about we're going to do the iPhone plus something else. And nobody knows for sure what that something else is going to be. But when you think about that level of activity, you don't have people going to the Windows Mobile developer meeting and drinking beers and talking about writing Windows mobile applications. It just doesn't happen. So when you put all these pieces together, and oh, by the way, maybe they don't have market share right now, but the people that can afford a $500 or a $600 phone and are spending money on iTunes are actually the customers that startups and people want. Mm-hmm. I actually think that whole, I say iPhone, but really that open mobile ecosystem where a startup, a developer, an entrepreneur never has to talk to a carrier is incredibly fundamental.
And this is where Palm
and
has to
huge
deliver.
Trend.
They've got to deliver with the Pre and the Web OS on this. And, again, lots of long throw. It's a long shot. I am too, but it's a long shot. They have a long way to come from behind. And it was last summer and fall, that the heads of Verizon Wireless and I believe AT&T Wireless made the commitment, yet delivered upon, that we are going to open our networks in this fashion to minimum spec phones. If you've got a device that meets minimum spec, buy it anywhere, activate it on our network, and use any applications that it can reach through our network. But that's easier said than done in terms of how they have to, move their business forward and how to get over a very long-held concept that is a carrier-locked world. But they have to deliver on that because people are going, if any one carrier does, you'll find people flocking to it, providing the right devices on it. Obviously, iPhone would be number one.
And I think that's, the way we're seeing a lot of this unstructured data become structured. We originally wanted to take, and I think this is something that we always miss. We try to take a traditional brick and mortar experience in the late 90s and we tried to move it online, and we realized that it failed most times miserably, that you couldn't take a traditional brick and mortar experience and move it online. I think we're seeing that now with a lot of media where they've tried to take the newspaper and move it online, and it's different media that we're consuming online. Video is going through that same evolution where, the video that we watch through web-enabled devices is very much different than the video that we watch through traditional ways.
And that'd be another trend that I would mention. Maybe not as big as some of these other ones here, but the idea of internet-delivered video becoming the new channel universe as opposed to the traditional cable, satellite, or over-the-air for, 20% of American households, is going to be an enormous change, not because of the technology that brings you the picture, but because of how it changes what you think of as choice, voice and control over what you watch. And again, things start to get real peaky when consumers have this kind of ability to have choice, voice, and control, and do it together in this communal environment online. All of a sudden, the hits get hittier, and the losers start to lose harder. If our experience holds true, it's changing the idea of what gets built, what gets flagged, or what gets green-lighted and produced. It'll change the content environment.
And what about broadband deployment through cities and just having that internet more accessible?
And faster, much faster,
and faster.
Right?
Just more accessibility.
Yeah, and that's where some of the fixed wireless stuff gets interesting. If WiMAX ends up being a major fixed wireless technology going forward, to make it much easier to get broadband wherever you are, even if it is to a premise, but no longer have to worry in what neighborhood am I in? Can I get DSL, or am I 18,000 feet from the CO and it kind of trickles down to a megabit or something? And the idea of getting much faster internet out there so that it's no longer a pause and buffer environment, which amazingly in this day and age, it's still, I think most of us probably have the same inward groan. I would imagine that I have when I go to a news site and I see a story I want to click on, and it's only there as video, and I want to read it so I can quickly get through it, scan it, and parse it. A lot of this is generational. But I see a story that's only video, I'll go find it at CNN instead of MSNBC, because I know they all have the same stories. It drives me nuts. But if there wasn't the click and pause and buffer headache, I might be, at least twice as likely to watch that story, even though it's still going to be a linear experience, is what really drives me nuts.
Shawn, I think, again, from an enterprise perspective, a couple of trends I'm seeing at least. There was talk about energy and efficiency management in the tech trends. Talk about smart grids and smart meters, but what I didn't hear was the notion of what we call smart buildings, which is really instrumenting. It's the convergence of building technology and IT to really reduce the carbon usage in commercial real estate, commercial buildings, which buildings comprise something like 45% of total CO2 emissions in the U.S. It's a huge number. And commercial is a bigger part of that than residential. So if we can use information technology as an information management tool, we can really, really dramatically affect the carbon usage in buildings. And so we're starting to see quite a lot of interest in that from our clients, and something I think is going to grow and be very tangible impact on the carbon footprint in the years to come.
What's the carrot for those either builders or for those large tenants who are speccing a building to go there? Is the cost savings?
Yeah, there's about an 18-month payback and about a 30%. It's about a 30% overall cost reduction.
Okay, so it's
maintenance
substantial.
Practices as well as carbon usage.
Huh.
An MBA program, but you only get a small fraction of sales revenue as profit, but savings.
Right to the bottom line, right to the pocket. Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a big area. The second is around digital marketing and the use of technology to really improve the effectiveness as well as the efficiency of online marketing. We're starting to see a lot of interest around personalized experiences on the web, and I know this can sound old, but actually it's sort of just hitting
delivering
the
on
in a big way,
yeah.
Delivering in a big way. When you have to take into account legacy systems and all those things, these things take a while. So actually building an intelligent web presence, an intelligent platform, if you will, that recognizes who you are and delivers a personalized experience in a way that improves some sort of business objective. Hopefully that'll lead, at some point in the future to, less of a CPM type model and more of a paid on clicks per desired outcome is one way to think about it. So that could actually revolutionize, I think, a lot of the way marketing is done.
Yeah, kind of a target acquisition payoff, because
Yes.
if you hit the right person, that's a very rewarding transaction, a very rewarding message.
Do something.
Yeah,
Even better.
of course that. Yeah, and this gets into the idea that
people talk about that a lot, but there is this other thing called awareness advertising. And awareness advertising is just about repetitive redundancy. You happen to see the Coke sign, you happen to see the Ford sign, whatever. And that's actually, in some ways, that's the biggest bucket of advertising that hasn't come online yet. And
right.
It's the billboards, it's all this stuff. So it's one of these things that it's not clear exactly how that's going to happen, but I think it is inevitable just because the time that people spend in these other areas is only increasing. So I think that there's only so far you can go with pay-per-click sort of advertising and CPA, cost per action sort of advertising. And you have to find a way, and I don't know what it is yet, but we're looking at a lot of different things to bring awareness advertising online in a way that's measurable. And people don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason that TV has survived for as long as it has in terms of the dollars that are coming in. But I think that shift is absolutely going to happen.
And behavioral targeting's had lots of fits and starts around this. But to your earlier point around the millennials and privacy,
Yeah.
if millennials are more comfortable sharing information, that behavioral targeting effectiveness can go way up if they're willing to share more information about themselves and their.
Well, you have these exchanges that are starting to emerge where people are trading information. So you might have like a car site has certain behavioral information about you that they might trade with somebody who's completely different. So you're targeted somewhere else. But you can start to imagine where if you wanted to, you actually sell information about yourself. Right. And to a certain extent, there's always been this kind of this barter that you've had, right? You know, the idea of watching TV was part of the deal was you were going to pay for it by suffering through advertising, right? So I think that especially looking at the millennials and going in, like you were saying, with the privacy piece, I do think that as crazy as it may sound to us in the room, the idea of being able to sell on a subscription basis things that are, you know, basic privacy behavioral information that might make you $50, people might do that. Yeah. So I think that's a really good idea.
With a few minutes left, why don't we turn it over to any questions in the audience and see if there are any questions or comments in the audience.
We got a mic here.
And there's a mic coming around. I think we got one question there in the back.
So I'm particularly interested in this peakiness phenomenon. It suggests that merchandisers or product developers have less of an opportunity to iterate and then perfect or get their products right. Would you actually agree with that? Do you only have one shot to get out there into the market in this peakiness kind of a market?
It might be overstating it to say you have one shot, but that's the concept to a degree, is that you have a narrower window. You have a narrower chance to fix it in the field. So once your product arrives, if it arrives flawed, the Palm Pre is on everyone's mind right now. We are going to be so intrigued to watch how its arrival, acceptance, and either success or failure curve goes. It's one of the biggest ones since we've seen this phenomenon. They have a very narrow window to get it right, whereas if this had been happening 5, 6, 7 years ago, they'd have more time to get it right.
Well, I think,
plus the iPhone competition is part of it as well. Because you have hits in a field,
yeah,
the bar is very high because someone's done it right before.
Well, the one thing I would say is I think that to this specific question of do you have time to iterate or not, it depends a lot on whether you're talking about a physical product or service or you're talking about a software product or service. So I think for things that are physical, that go into boxes and are hard to do and they require huge lead times, I think on one hand, you actually have closer to launch to get it right because the whole manufacturing supply chain, like we're in a company called iFi, and a lot of people don't realize this, the wireless memory cards, they're actually manufactured in San Jose. And they can do it very quickly, so we don't have to take a lot of inventory risks there. So there are things you can do to manage it, but you have to get the hardware right. Now, if you look at, say, a service and consumer services, like I don't know how many people in the room are familiar with Mint. We're the largest shareholders in Mint. We've been involved with the company since pre-product launch. Mint is it's software delivered as a service for a consumer. And it's very different than shrink-wrap software. So as long as you have kind of a core basic feature set that works and is very bulletproof, then you can continue to iterate, quickly change things. And the experience that you can have with your customer is one where if your software continues to improve over time, every time you come back, that actually sets up your mind in a very good place and it builds up a positive affinity for the brand. And it's almost like having a spouse that you know is actually only going to change for the better, you know, each time. And you know each time that you go back to the site, that it's going to be a better experience. You're like, wow, what's going to be there? What's going to be the new feature? What's going to, you know, like all these things. So I think that if you do this bifurcation and you think about something that's in hardware, yes, it's harder. But I think on the software side, if you set it up and you can deliver on your promise of improving, then you have lots of opportunities to iterate and improve.
Noel, what do you actually see when, I mean, you've launched hundreds of products over the last 20 years. What are you actually seeing now?
Well, I think in answer to that peakiness question, I think you have to be ready for Act 2 as soon as you launch Act 1. And that whole sustainability of profitability is a challenge for companies. Because if it's really successful, profit drops to the bottom. It's a race to the bottom as far as prices and consumer electronics. Apple being the exception, and we should be able to learn from that model. But that whole launching of products, you have to continually reinvent yourself all the time for regular companies like that. And so as soon as you design a product, you launch it, you got to think of what the next product is, and you got to be prepared to launch that.
I'd also make one point about mobile devices in that area, because we're talking a lot about that, because you still have this era, until it changes one day, of typical 2-year carrier lock and carrier-specific devices. That increases the irritation with products that don't do well. I think people are very afraid of going for a product that isn't one of the very best. So they get very peaky. And I'd say the peakiest thing we see are handhelds, because you have to get married to it. Whereas you can go buy a netbook, and if you don't like it, well, all right, you're out $400. So, if you can deal with that, you might go a little bit outside the peak curve. But boy, with a mobile device, you're going to go iPhone or you're going to go home. Or you're going to go BlackBerry. I mean, those are the two big dogs still, and that's really where it's going. And, like you say, the rubber boot makers might be, out of that game soon.
And I think elsewhere, what you see with software, you see companies more willing to pre-launch it. So they try to get out in front of that peakiness, and they almost get a free pass in launching it in a kind of beta stage.
Well, yeah, they get to beta. Hardware doesn't get to beta.
Well,
so.
I think on hardware you see new generations come out. So you see the Kindle come out, and they say, okay, maybe we, that's our pre-launch, if you will. That's our beta.
Yeah.
Now here's our second generation. Now here's our third generation. Apple's done a very good job at that, at coming out with new generations and if you will, introducing what to the market is a new product.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just another addition to that product. Got a mic in the back?
You haven't covered about 80% of the items on the list of the top 10 trends. Are you going to cover some of these other items today?
I think we could have probably chosen one topic today and just covered one topic. We could do a 10-week series on the 10 trends.
We've got the millennials, unstructured data, some wireless.
Right here in.
The question I had is, Brian, you were talking about looking at videos. I would rather look at the text as well, because I can get better coverage sometimes in the mountains of India than I can around Silicon Valley. Just getting my iPhone or using AT&T or Verizon, sometimes I carry 3 or 4 mobile phones just to get access wherever I am.
It's amazing how many of us still do that.
Right. And I was just wondering about broadband as a trend, or creating more efficiencies in streaming, what the trends there are, like grid networks. Have you seen any technology? And also, as people are changing gadgets, looking at the cradle-to-cradle aspect, the sustainability of people just keep throwing gadgets away, and also maybe looking at the chargers, something like a green plug, where there's just more of a standardization, so we don't keep building up waste. I know that's a lot of subjects, but when I was talking about broadband, then I talking about all the gadgets being thrown away because they don't work.
So what do you guys think? This move to sustainability is a tremendous issue. A lot of the trends that were talked about were around energy use, but sustainability generally is a big issue. We did a recent consumer study and found that environmentally friendly features actually ranked higher than brand when it came to what consumers wanted in their next device. So it's moved up tremendously on the list.
Yeah, we just launched a program with PG&E and the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, SMUD, where you're going to see new labels on electronic products in the big retailers, and from Dell and HP and the big manufacturers, it'll say save or save more. It'll be up in the corner of a monitor or a television. That's the first categories to launch. And it kind of goes where the EPA label used to go, but the Energy Star label, I should say. But this is a new program oriented toward consumer electronics to really indicate that there is a big savings you can achieve in energy usage, and also end-of-life recycling if you choose the right product. But we were looking at some of the research for that, and 70% of consumers are interested in sustainable or low energy consumption products in things like household goods. So they're interested in recycled paper towels, or you get to 40% in automobiles because hybrids are very aware. You get down to consumer electronics, and maybe 15% at best of consumers are even aware that there is a choice for a more sustainable TV or computer. It's way down the list, which is odd because there's a huge amount of power consumption and a huge amount of waste that comes out of those two categories. And that's one of the reasons that we as an industry, those of us that are in retailing, manufacturing, or the media about these products, need to just get consumers to think, yeah, a great TV can also be green. they're kind of concerned that, oh, if it's a green TV, it's not a great television. And we have to break through that. We're not quite sure where that comes from. It's a performance mentality.
The problem is nobody really. I think a lot of these things track back to this thing called money and ability to save money. And I think from a sustainability and environmental point of view, the companies that will win and will do well will be the ones that save people money, and where consumers are aware that they're saving money. So the problem today with consumer electronics is you actually don't know how much your TV uses. And yeah, you can see the little sticker, et cetera, but it's not until you might be able to see on your bill something that says, your TV this month cost you $30, that people could think about it in a very different way. That information hasn't been presented to people, and part of that's technology, the sensor and the connectivity infrastructure that you would need to be able in real time say, you've used this many joules of energy in your TV.
Yeah, to have an itemized energy bill.
And to have that itemized is going to happen. It's not going to happen anytime soon.
But you'll start talking to your neighbors.
It will happen, and people become aware.
Yeah, like a kilowatt meter on every device, right?
Yeah, but I think a question is
something Monster could make.
Well, will customers pay money to save money? Okay, so to develop a better battery that's more sustainable to the environment may cost more to buy the battery.
It's the hybrid car conundrum. It's like, yes, I'm going to buy a Prius that costs X amount more than, let's say, a similarly equipped Corolla. How soon will I make back the several $1,000s more?
Solar energy, and you go on and on. Yes.
It's not just the savings at the pump.
But to the consumer, it is.
It's not going to the pump.
Right, but the consumer is more concerned about their pocketbook than about doing the right thing. So we've got to hit them there first. Yeah.
I don't think there's a definable trend.
And price and features are still the driving factors behind the purchase decision.
It's still a selfish market out there.
Yeah, I think we've got time for one last question.
You talked about the mass market and the enterprise. Your thoughts on the trends on the technology needs and the small and medium businesses? Are you focusing on that in particular?
Well, I think that's an area we find interesting. It's one that's been very hard to aggregate over time. I think what we like is, when we think about that, is there's a company called Spiceworks, and what they do is they give away IT management software for free. And free is kind of the new opportunity if you think about lead generation as your monetization vehicle on the other side. So you look at Mint, for example. It's not just for individuals, but it's also for small and medium businesses are starting to use it. So I do think it's an opportunity, but I don't want to take a lot of time, kind of diving into that.
I don't think we figured out free yet.
Yeah. Well, consumers have. They got to figure it out. They want it. That's easy. That's a simple formula for them. Yeah, and the web has established a bad free habit out there. Let's face that. We've gotten ourselves used to. If we want it, it should be available in a free version.
Right. So, any final comments? Any final thoughts as we head out today?
Well, we live in a wonderful world. That's why we're here, and figuring out how to productize it, monetize it, sustain it, and build companies is just a wonderful world.
And the brands are still very important. It's not just a matter of people's recommendation at SKU level. It's also a recommendation that builds brands still. That never goes away. And I think you were talking, Rob, about the idea of awareness marketing still being important, because it's much easier to accept a recommendation of a product that you have some familiarity for. If you've already got a folder open in your head, then I can slot the iPhone brochure in there. If you don't have Apple open in your head, it's harder, even with a product that's that hot. That may be the exception, but if people don't feel good about Palm, they're much less likely to embrace the Pre, even if it's the best thing ever invented in a few weeks. That baggage or that lack of openness makes awareness and brand still important, even in a very specific SKU-level world of recommendation.
I think, just as a final comment, I actually think we're going to look back at where we are right now as a new golden age for what's going on in technology. There's so many advances in so many fields. Life expectancy is going up, exciting new healthcare things that we've talked about. And on the technology side, it is only accelerating, and you can do it for less capital to do interesting new applications and services. So I think it's a fantastic time to be running around the technology business as an entrepreneur.
Yep, still a golden age.
Thank you all for coming, and a big round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you very much to Shawn and Rob and Brian, Tim and Noel for sharing your insights with us this morning. As a small gesture of thanks, we have a fine Churchill Club T-shirt for your wearing pleasure.
Right.
Please wear it in good health. And thank you all for coming, and see you at the next meeting of the club.
Thanks, Jenny.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. It was good work. Yeah.
All right.
Everything we're on this.
Yeah, good.
Thoughts? Yeah, I will. I'll bounce you my information. That's not any cards, so I'm going to bounce to everyone there.
Yeah, how are you? How are things? Good? Has been a while, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's well exciting to be in the
What are you
valley.
up to now?
No place
Yes.
else you want to be.
Oh, right. Hi, Patricia. How are you? Good to meet you. I know.
I got to stop by and at a minimum say hi. Have a good day.
Good, good. Now, where's your office? That's right. You're down here. That's right. I forgot. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Great. Yes, that's put a face with a name.
I know.
Yeah, I always love doing the briefing for you guys. It's such a...
You know, it's a huge benefit.
Good.
Hey, how are you? Very good. I'm Noel. Hi, Noel. Sure. Oh, good. Very good. Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. I'm always going to given the
Great. Yeah, you're on our second one.
emphasis even in the main event as well as now on taking costs away from the enterprise. It was very, very consumer tech oriented. Don't you think? Because you are from the
Being an entrepreneur.
enterprise side, I thought I'd tell you to discuss that. But that is
It's good to see you.
Hi. Materials. And on the IT side, things like cloud and virtualization.
See, the IT never goes out of IT. You just keep going up.
Because the information is available, you have to mine it.
Okay. It's an area we're interested in, but it is an area that we think is pretty well baked. So, I'm friends with, I don't know if you're familiar with Shasta, but, you know, and some of these others.
Yeah, I know. So
With virtualization, I think for us that would probably be a tough
That's not
area
where the cost savings are.
to look at right now. It's just
elsewhere. Oh, you did that.
but I probably have too much experience in that area right now. But I do think it's a fertile area. Yeah. That's good.
All right, well, good.
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just, you know, it's just in terms of what we do. We're a small firm, so we just focus on a few areas that we think are, just aren't as many competitors sitting around. So I'm not dissuading you from it. I'm just really talking about it there. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to understand.
Or
I
the
like your
children
ideas.
in India don't have.
Oh, thank you.
Even if you're not investing,
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah, feel free to zip me an email. Zip me an email and we'll see if something works out. Great. Thanks. Thank you.
So how do you Hi. Without the
Oh, good to know. You're one of the good guys. Thank you. Here you go. Oh, sure, yeah. So,
I've been working out how I don't know if you follow these guys at all. Sufficient electricity.
Absolutely. Pleasure meeting you.
Microfinance.
Oh, great. That's good to hear.
Before the kids graduate, because parents
Because they now have the portal.
It was pretty interesting.
of course, but it's also in Native American reservations and inner cities. Yes. Because no matter how poor, yes, yes.
Think of it as being a developing nation.
Right. Because one of the greatest difficulties in inner cities is they don't have the political platform services that would let them get to the jobs such as there are creating. So if we could say, okay, it doesn't even matter if it's it doesn't matter if you take comp science or using it on your computer.
There's a commercial opportunity with those things. The wireless connectivity and electric payments.
Now, okay, so,
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
microfinance.
Thanks. I don't think people realize just how fundamental it is.
One of the things, I did a and now we can install bootstrap obviously. So, 20-30-year history. Their job was completely
Yeah.
And then there's
Right.
And to some extent, TurboTax.
Right.
Actually,
TurboTax is pretty good. Right.
Even though there's a million, a couple million.
Right. Yeah. How you doing? I'm Rob. Oh, great.
Anyway,
thank you. I really appreciate it. Oh, great. Okay. Okay. Oh, the small. Well, then you should talk to Spiceworks. Are you familiar with Spiceworks? So you know what they do. Spice, S-P-I-C-E. What they do is they give away. I realized after I started to answer that it was not worth going into. But I think you'll find this
like charity navigator
for the whole crowd.
It would be possible.
What they do is they give away IT management software for free.
But is there any vetting done by Wiser? Come on in and post your presence.
500,000 downloads. They've had hundreds of thousands of installations. And the way that they make money is off of advertising to the IT administrator's desktop. Hey, that was fun. Yeah.
Social network.
Sorry to disagree with you on some of those things. But that was fun. Yeah.
And then I look at who's
so they do it through advertising, but since they're doing IT management,
send you an email about
these are the small and medium businesses that have really tight budgets, so they like free. They're best of breed, so they're better than paid point products in this space. So people prefer to use the free product. And they're at about cash flow break-even based on advertising. Okay. Now, where they make money and what they're building out is the lead generation piece. So let's say I've been installing an enterprise, and the enterprise has gone from 50 to 100 users. I can give a recommendation, say your switch is getting full. Other law firms like you, when they go 50 to 100 users, tend to install a backbone switch. Click here if you'd like a referral to a local bar, it can come and do it, or click here to have Cisco come do it coordinated for you. I see your printers have been running out of toner, and you've taken a few days to replace it. Would you like to set up our automatic replenishment program, and we'll send you toner each time you need toner, because we know, because we're in that spot. We see that you have 20 Macs and 80 PCs on your network, okay? Did you know that your Macs don't have antivirus software? You might have forgotten to do it. Click here if you'd like us to automatically install the trend, whatever it is, onto your Macintosh. So basically, what they can do is they can roll up the bar business because they know exactly what's going on in your network, and that's where you can make money off of market. Yes, sir. Yeah, and that's a bad thing. Okay. Yeah. Spiceworks. Yeah. If you're interested in connection experience.
So when we're talking about,
but it's
thinking of accessing video online.
You should check it out, though. Yeah. Because it's a bottoms-up approach, and what they do is, for example, like think about you need the backbone switch, you're an IT administrator, you're like, this is a headache, right? Because I know I'm running out of capacity or I'll lose my job, but I have to go ask for budget to put in that switch. So what they can do is they can say, here is the switch that other people use, here are the pros and cons of these 5 switches, and they can put together the ROI case, so they can just hit print and take it to their budget guy, and then they go, oh, great, okay, yeah, no brainer, buy the switch. So they can they can increase the conversion efficiency of those. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And these guys are all out of Tivoli, and they're in Austin. Yeah. I mean, these guys are old pros in this business. They know how it works. So
Great to be with you today.
Yeah.
Great to spend more time.
I take a look at their site, just spiceworks.com, but I think the combination, like where in terms of working together with the right part of IBM, could be really interesting. Yeah.
I'm actually on a red eye tonight.
Yeah. Oh, it's a really good mix. And their software offering just gets better and better and better and better and better as they get more and more feedback, more and more installations.
You guys need me again? I'd love to take part.
Yeah.
I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You guys did
Thank you. You'd be silly not to talk to these guys. Yeah. Okay, great. You bet. Thanks for coming up. Okay.
I do.
And instead of looking for the fact that all this information was available in the FAQs, right? Okay. So even though there was a Usenet group where you could ask anything and no one would complain, and so forth and so on, because they couldn't find out. Right. They didn't already know something. Right. This is the biggest problem ever. Oh, great. Thanks. The question you didn't know to ask.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Right.
That's something I work on now in a digital textbook setting. But that's a separate topic that I need to get into with you some other time.
Yeah. Now you not knowing what question to ask is almost as important as how to find the answer to what you
So Arnold Schwarzenegger is saying we need digital textbooks in California.
Oh, they don't care.
Because the computers are cheaper than the books. You can save a huge amount of money. But nobody knows how to make that up in the context of current textbook standards and
you manage servers, or they're helping you manage the way that your PCs and infrastructure and firewall hook up with cloud.
About how awful
They'll just help you either way.
and they still are. And these everything is bad as he said.
And it's a very difficult industry to move ahead.
I don't know all the details, but I mean, just because I'm not leading the investment, but it is meant to be pretty comprehensive. Yeah, and it's been shipping for probably about 3 years now, and they do pushes and it's delivered as a service.
But I can imagine what
friction
that runs into in the established education.
Yeah, check it out.
This is the point that the current acquisition
it'll
process
explain itself.
handles
Think LinkedIn online.
Oh, okay.
So we have to
automatically hook up to all your bank accounts, credit card, program statements. It sounds
Whereas
crazy.
the point is
Put in
now
all your
the
passwords.
children and the teachers
They have a
can
million
evaluate.
users.
Were you able to
They have
learn
about
from this?
600,000 active
And if not,
people
how
that go on a
would you
regular
have been
basis.
able?
And
if some bright kid in the class knows how to teach some other kid
and then
in
they
the
make
class
their money off of lead
by a method
generation.
that's
So
different
they
from
say,
what the books
why are
teach.
you using this credit
Well,
card?
yes, put
So
that
you just
in.
click a tab
Modify
that
that
says
into the
ways to-
wiki base.
The tab that says ways to save, and then when you
And
click
other
ways
students
to
and
save,
teachers
it
say,
says,
But
why are you
I
using a
was
credit card that has
starting to tell you a
50%?
story.
If you had used this one,
So then,
12%,
when AOL
then you would have saved $300 last year, given what we actually know about your actual
signed on to AOL and AOL you
and how much balance you
AOL
actually
One day
evolve
they
each
said,
month.
we're opening up
They give you
AOL
very
to the
personalized
internet.
recommendations.
You can get the web.
Yeah, so that's why they're
inside AOL.
accelerating.
Well, two things happened. Their servers died, and they had to completely outsource their entire marketing.
Rob Coneybeer.
They could not
Oh, great.
possibly grow it fast enough. And so, one of the big, all over the country network load balance will take care of the tech.
out there
You
that are
just sign up
most
to users,
compelling,
companies,
in
took over
terms
their
of
entire
how to manage these.
So that was one. The other was what a Usenet is known as.
We've thought about it a little bit in a horizontal way,
Every
but the stuff that's really interesting to us is where there's a very vertical
requiring or even encouraging students
So
to get a computer.
the reason I mentioned the geo browser is because we invested in a company called
Every
Geodelic.
September when the freshmen
Geodelic.
turned up,
So they haven't
every
launched the
single
product
one
yet,
of
but
them was a new
basically what they're doing is
all
they're building
in
this geo
1
browser
week.
that I was talking about, which is
Sure, they needed help using and resources that needed help access.
Right, and they were newbies for months, so it just went on and on.
And
So yeah, the
that
endless
unstructured data could be for a given
constant-
restaurant.
And then in
it's not
January,
just
you get
Yelp,
another bunch.
Right, you get
but
another, of course,
could be
you got people
information
coming in
from
every
people
term.
in cities
Right,
or
And when
otherwise
vacation
in a
started,
way
we get
that's
another
easy to
bunch.
consume.
Yeah, right.
In a given
Yeah, so we're in this endless cycle, and we
So
still,
experts
still
Now,
are
there
doing
is
it.
actually, I can't remember what it is, there
They
is
go out
actually
and
an
they take
official
all
end
this,
date for
it's that
Oh,
semi-structured
Yeah,
data,
as I say, I forgot
but
what
it
it
might
was,
have
but I
many
can look it up.
different types of structures,
where
and then give it to you in a
essentially
unified, normalized way. So that, like, if
in
I say I want a specific Sony camera,
Yeah.
I get all the information and all the places I can buy it, and
that
reviews
didn't
for
get
that
all
camera.
the newbies.
So for us, that's what we mean by like a vertical approach,
widely
as opposed to
distributed.
finding a
Because it
technology.
doesn't become, because the computer no longer is part of a place you go and you get exposed to it. It becomes part of your life all the time, and you bring that experience with you.
That's how we
The other thing
think
is
about
that
it.
mailing lists,
Now, the examples
mailing lists are
inside
not
are talking about
supplanted.
data that is
They're still
publicly available.
the
Everybody
number of
has
news
access.
groups is
Now, there's
growing.
other
But
part
you
of
could
it,
go
which
get
is
on
your
our
personal
closed
data.
mailing
Things
list
like email
and know
content
that
or
you would not
whatever
interact
might be channeled more towards
with
you.
newbies.
Is that
and
also
spam.
an area that you see of interest?
That
Or
if you have a
It's
professional
definitely
list,
of
then only
interest, but
professionals
it's
are
kind
getting
of
on
the
there.
same thing. Like,
If you have a list
They
for
have their
certain
own inventors. They don't want to.
topic,
So
you
I'll
only
say
let people
something
in
that
who
may
already
sound
know something about the topic.
I
Still a
actually
powerful
think
model.
email is
Still a
broken.
very powerful model. The people
But this
I actually
is one
think
of
it
the
works
things we
really
get
well.
in the spam business.
Incredibly
I'm
efficient.
the
I think
founder of
the way
Coalition
people
Against
use
UC.
inbox today,
Um,
if you look at how people
we have been
Outlook or
trying to explain opt-in
People use
to
different
the
approaches.
direct
There's some
market
people that
system
are leaders.
for over a decade.
There are some people that just
Right. I think at this point you
Now,
kind of
here's the
prioritize
problem,
and forget about other
is that
stuff. There's filers,
they
people
teach
that save everything.
confirmed opt-in to all their members.
I think
Go
the
to a
only thing
workshop
that's
at
broken is
DMA
the ability to rapidly
and
search through
ask how to
email.
set up mailing lists.
I think being able to search through email, like
email advertising,
keywords or tags,
you've got to
is probably the biggest
either
area of
have
improvement.
a business relationship that bought something from you or who's inquired about a issue. Just when you can put them on a list.
Yeah,
Low
so when I
volume.
think, so when I think about it, I think there are some people, sometimes
And if you really want to have them signed up on a discussion list, anything high volume, then they have to actually sign up and get an email confirming all these things.
That industry will never move.
But now we
I know I'm being honest.
social,
Actually, you're not. I mean, it's,
where you have already opted in
I agree with you that email
to hear from members of the network. Okay, this is free speech.
right.
And you can only hear from people at a certain degree of affinity.
Right. You've already accepted it to your
Right.
follow
Or
what
you can get an inquiry from somebody.
Then it
Would you like
starts
to
to
connect?
start
Can I
to
talk to you about it?
Right.
Well, that's where it's broken.
Oh, that's great. You're in my network. Well, thank you, but no. Or, I don't know this person, I get a negative rating. Right, and it's this,
saving all their email
it's this rating by the members.
I agree.
Eventually,
And it's happening.
yeah, exactly. They know somebody was working with it. He was talking about.
Right.
It's like,
It's one of the best ways to commit trust.
Slashdot is
Yeah, so
nearly
you can with your example, it's
without moderation, it would be
the data you're talking about.
But with moderation,
Slashdot is something of a miracle in its own way,
with
but it
moderation,
works.
you just get the subject line
Yeah.
for all the stuff that's below your level.
Right. Right.
So you control how much you set. And people are
Locally, public Slashdot's community. What about my own data sources that might also be true? Just curious if you know anybody.
Yeah. They don't leave everything.
I mean, like in email is all Zobney.
These systems do work sometimes, but they're more work than they should.
Which Zobney? It's inbox backwards. Yeah. I mean, there are like 5 companies doing it. They'll probably be pretty successful.
Yeah.
which means that most stuff doesn't have to.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for coming up and introducing yourself.
Pleasure.
Great. Hi. Rob Coneybeer. How are you?
I think proper service. Or you have your affinity.
Where thanks. Okay. Oh yeah, no, extensive is great. Okay. I have not heard much about educational students. Yeah.
So she's like 3 degrees?
What did you say to that? Okay.
Kevin Bacon. What is he doing? That's up at
When were you at Cisco? 10 years ago? Or?
It's not. It's hard to play Star Wars games.
Right. What's the rough part? It's pretty good. Right. Yeah. What's better than that?
Did you work with Rajiv? Rajiv Ramaswamy?
Right.
She does not have a contract.
Amazing.
Overarching objective is of course costs.
And then when she gets extra, then she gets to play.
Okay.
It's a pretty good helmet for her.
Up in the Letterman building.
It's an amazing
Okay, well, let's get together and chat. I did a lot of networking stuff. I'm kind of sworn it off now. But do you remember Growth Networks at all? On Cisco, of course. That's what I was saying about.
And also performance is kind of
Yeah, 5X was one of the companies. I was
Yeah, at the school.
yeah, 5X might have needed some help.
Well, that's a huge story about
Guys, this is where you need to
Drop the bottom line. Yeah.
And then I have to call
really going down for blood.
This is I think it's just racing.
Yeah.
And it's
yeah, because no,
I see businesses in a situation where
Oh, is that where you're living now?
yeah.
Oh, so you're living in
So I'm
Green.
living there.
Real money.
Okay.
And that's the thing, though. When you tell them, when they start to realize you don't get the bottom line.
So how often are you back?
The full suite software companies kind of slowing it down.
Okay. My suspicion is we may need to shoot for 3 weeks out or 3 months out. And I'd love to learn.
Yeah. And the extracting of that money is done by those who game the system as opposed to those who
Okay.
Yeah. But anyone who's
Warren Buffett was the only one I know who not only seriously told everyone who would listen to
get it. Yeah. I know. No one else was that honest and that pressing. But people who are saving money through efficiency, there's no
legitimate savings,
and it comes to you.
Hugely profitable.
It comes to you. You don't have to game the system to get your slice. It's going to drop right to you by never having to flow out.
Now, the only obstacle to this communication has been problems that people have. First, I would have been called.
At the end of the day, it tends to be applications. Having using technology for the entire
Their version that software and
solve very
This is something which goes back to
Sure. Yeah.
Spain,
And also,
South America. And the gold and silver and jewels were flowing in.
Yeah.
Literally by the shipload. Yeah. By the number of tons per ship.
Yeah.
Where some of these treasure ships have been valued in hundreds of millions.
Right. Oh, yeah, it's crazy.
It was incredible inflation not done by printing paper only.
Right. Right. But by the arrival of the riches.
Which by Spanish imperial law stayed outside the empire.
Oh, interesting. So the concentration is amazing.
I'm trying to live without a landline right now, and it's not working. So
Their socialist coverage depended on either owning land or going to Latin America and getting treasure. And owning land was so
Yeah, so not exciting.
So 14th century.
Right.
consumers may have
coming back with
maybe
the riches.
bothering less about privacy. I think the enterprise kind of
you're getting close. Do you have family over there? Or
anywhere else.
There's the
Oh, okay.
That's big question.
That was the Inquisition caused the Netherlands to.
Oh, and then you decided to stay?
And because they were rebelling against
customer data on sales.
Oh, I see.
That's become very acceptable.
Yeah.
Like
Everything's about to turn around.
employee information on
Okay.
platforms like SuccessFactors and other SaaS software.
Yeah.
So I think we are there.
Is this when they entered their era of banking companies? Okay. So at that point of that.
And the other factor that you mentioned about how they integrate and, because after all inside the enterprise, how unclean the data sources are, they find some ways to integration.
But I would love to
help you with
Yeah,
that.
right.
these great big ships came up the English Channel, got chased around, and had to go back to Ireland.
Right.
So the thing was, again, this comes back to the point
Unless they've already connected.
those big ships were almost as big as
But in terms of the brainstorming around that, and talking about that, comparing notes, I can but I'm just saying very realistically,
more impressive. Good for us.
Not realizing this.
And then the much smaller, but more maneuverable Dutch ships. Clobbered.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like that's who we are these days. We're so
I'd be happy to brainstorm.
Our military.
That's very interesting. Coming bottom up.
And by the way, I'm not persuading
all of us, employees in the enterprise, are the consumers. And our trends kind of force the IT to.
right.
In order to fulfill the doctrine of the last several decades of being able to fight two fronts. Okay, fine. So we're in two fronts. We have to. One of us. Okay. That means if there's actually a real military situation, we don't have any spare.
We got no spare for the third.
Well, the problem is it's not laziness. It's when you're
And North Korea understands. They cannot go after.
That's the problem. It's not. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Has to get
Great. Well, thanks for introducing yourself. Okay, thanks.
So
You'll just send me an email. And we'll do it. Okay. Let me know when you're coming out. Yeah, because I'm guessing you're not out here for a month, right?
No, you're right.
Yeah.
Know that they've got us. We've got ourselves.
Sounds good. Okay. Bye-bye.
Pleasure. That was fun.
Oh, yeah, there was.
Yeah, that was good banner.
Yeah, no, we were trying to.
trying to tell them, no, you can't.
I'm gonna have a
So they're saying,
notification.
Israel is okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, well,
Bombs,
right.
we can't have a civilian.
You know what? Actually,
Well, then it gets into that whole slippery slope.
even for all the hype,
Which has a big cover of everything got scowling.
Yeah.
And a big headline, everything in Iran is wrong. Oh wait, everything in Iran that you know is wrong.
So there was one, but there was one point, Ram brought up a point about mobile apps and advertising. There was one point that Air let out in that conversation.
We have
bring it up, but
we have nobody who in the diplomatic corps who has ever served in
that's a big
25 years after the revolution.
since Reagan.
What you think about market cap? It could be a $10 billion company.
Oh yeah, geez, 2000, over 30 years out.
And so we have
Everybody
Iranians
kind of
writing
like
this.
We just talked about this as the biggest growth trend.
Right, and you said $1 billion.
Right.
Yeah.
But in this last,
so there's still something around the business model.
Right.
The thing about making money.
Yeah. 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 I don't know. I don't know the answer yet. But I do know that real world annotation is never been important at some point. The idea of where you are, right information relative to where you are.
The thing you carry with you.
enormous actually applies to all the
Yeah, we always have a problem with
privacy
confusion.
And he
And
actually
if you can loosen up on those
We always
privacy
have a problem with the blockchain.
whether we want to or not.
people who live in the
You don't remember how many companies put themselves in log into your favorite
the
site?
slightest nuance leaps out at
Right,
you.
right.
Whereas for us,
They're constantly
It's hardly a prompt.
I'm sorry, did you say something?
Yeah, it's not enough for us to react because we're so caught up in arguing.
So the State Department
Kids don't care, but for the mass,
but in the
they are going to be the mass market. That's the whole point of the millennial. That's the whole part of the millennial. That's coming.
So I'm not quite there yet.
Exactly, they're not using
Right.
Twitter.
Right. Because if that word gets out,
Check it out. Look at the
the
numbers.
blog
Look at the demographic
starts looking
statistics.
at what people from Iran say.
Yeah.
What do the reformers say? Not just the people in Iran.
Part of the reason they like instant
What do the universities say?
What
The schools say?
Yeah.
Right?
because there's no.
And again, that's something we don't understand.
It's one idea.
So
Don't
it can be tracked,
about
it
the
can be,
CIA.
but the reality is the chances of it being found
Forget
by
that.
somebody later.
In fact, I was
So you
delighted
find IMs versus
and the
text.
CIA because we have
Preference for IMs versus text, or you saying the same thing? It's just.
CIA's
I thought it was great to let you guys.
Right. Funny man.
That was really a pleasure.
I'll tell you later.
Thanks. Your questions, by the way.
I really don't remember it being there.
I'm a generalist, and I've worked in startups and all kinds of things. So over every question that you ask, I have a company I worked for that was doing that 10 or 15 years ago, and a perspective about how long it takes. Not just viral,
Put it up on YouTube and
here.
make it global. Yeah, because you got a printout of one of the other ones, right? Yeah, this will be on YouTube. Yeah. Although, yeah, I think someone was telling you it's not being recorded. I was told it was being recorded. Right. I was just assuming it was being recorded. Yeah. Okay. So it'll go up.
And I'm working on the next video.
Right. Oh, you are? Okay, you're right. All right, guys. See you later.
So we're at 3 million. Not just us, but other one-to-one computing. Right. Negroponte is the head of this. Now, do you know about his brother? Don Negroponte of the State Department? Oh, yeah. And for a little while, head of all U.S. investments. Known on the left as John's Death Squad Negroponte. I'll save the world my way. But anyway, yes, the next business. And their family.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a program to set up microfinance to support families who have to eat by microfinance enough electricity and broadband for the kids to get an education, for everybody to get often when they need to acquire business intelligence, economic information. I mean, fundamentally, the fact that between Amazon and eBay,
When they get older, it's going to all
But I think Jan's point, yeah, but I think your point about yes.
Internet condom. I gotta remember that one.
Yeah. Well, I worked with a company and we called it the Internet Condom.